From interviews to jail calls, Ditto Transcripts delivers fast, confidential, and court-ready transcription for law enforcement agencies. Ditto is CJIS compliant and is already working with agencies all over the U.S., including the Washington State Patrol and the National Park Service Investigations Unit. Get started now at dittotranscripts.com. That's dittotranscripts.com. To hear details about all the applications of Ditto Transcripts and exactly why this is a key solution for your organization's workload issues, check out episode 232. When you don't know how a recruit's really doing until week 10, that's a problem. TrackWired's field training management software replaces old school paperwork with a clean, automated system. Streamlined reporting, knowledge comprehension, and crystal clear performance trends, all handled in one secure place. TrackWire gives you real-time insight into their field training process so supervisors get real-time visibility. FTOs save hours and recruits stay on track. If you want to tighten up your FTO program, start by going to trackwire.com. That's TRACwire.com. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Today I'm joined by Andrew McCormick, retired LEO, retired SWAT sergeant, which, just to start off, that's an impressive role to retire out of because it's like, these are not my words. A lot of current and prior SWAT folks have said it's a young man's game, which just makes it really impressive when people are on the team a long time. And some of the people I respect most in my close circles, they were on the team a long time, but they hung and they got the thing done. But they definitely shared that there was a lot of wear and tear on the body from everything involved.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was on our team for 24 of my 27 years on the department.
Gosh.
So a bunch of different roles. Our team's probably a little bit different than most teams. We don't have per se like a specialty other than like breachers and the snipers. But so I was exposed to just about everything. Yeah.
Also kind of like a generalist thing, like most everyone on the team can do most every role.
Yeah, with the exception of being a sniper. The sniper, that requires more training each month. Same with like the explosive breachers.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of teams will have, guys or girls that are specific, like a point, like a shield cover, entry team, perimeter team. So our team was, since we're not a centralized team, everybody needed to be able to do the general roles. So that's kind of how our team was. We have about, I think right when I left, we were at about 28 operators for our team.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, we were decentralized. So everybody had other job functions, with the exception of me on the SWAT operations sergeant. And then I had another guy with me, another detective that was my assistant that helped.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, I'm excited to have you on, Andrew, because we talk frequently about performance and wellness and how they go hand in hand. And what better opportunity oftentimes to look at performance, specifically when you have high performing teams with high standards and high stakes. And so like anyone can recognize that the SWAT teams, like high performing SWAT teams, are often a good group to focus on for that. What are some of the things that stood out to you, like as an early SWAT officer, of like how this was a little bit different than your general patrol work requirements?
Yeah, when you first get on the team, I think you're just so overwhelmed by everything that you don't even have really time to think, or the long-term effects of the grind in and out. And things have changed over 24 years, 100%. For our team specifically, like you said, I was in Tempe, so Tempe's home of ASU. That adds 100,000 extra residents to our city between August and May of every year.
Mm-hmm.
So when I first got on our team in 2000, probably for the first, even 10 years or so, we averaged probably 12 to 16 call outs a year, deployments, I call them. And deployments could be high risk warrants, it could be actual call outs. So we weren't that busy. It was one a month,
Hmm.
and in our little town, that's 16. It could be really busy. Up into the last 2 or 3 years that I was there, we were averaging anywhere between 80 and 100 deployments a year.
Gosh.
So yeah, the numbers just went through the roof. So when as a newer officer, you're just excited to be there. You want to learn everything you can. You want to go to the trainings and learn and just be better. And then for us, our department really emphasized us being new on the team, taking that training and taking it back to our patrol squads and teaching them and helping them develop too. So, yeah, as a new one, it's definitely overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah, what's the secret sauce? What was your secret to making it almost your entire career on the team and retiring as a sergeant where you're still in the mix, you're still on the team, you're still planning and doing those deployments. I mean, because it can be such a wear on people. You pointed out how much pace there increased, towards the end of your career. So it's not just the kit, right? It's not just the equipment and the training and doing deployments, but it's also getting getting up super early, right? To get out on these early morning ops and the sleep disruption on the body. Do you have anything that you think was like really critical for you?
The funny thing is like I don't want to like make myself sound too old, but the first 4 or 5 years on our SWAT team, we actually got called out from pagers.
Oh yeah.
People that are listening to this probably don't even remember
No,
what a
there's
pager
a
is.
lot of my my compatriots coming on like that. It was the pager generation when I was a new cop too. Just because it
Yeah,
was oftentimes more reliable. Or you can have an option, right? You could get called on your personal cell phone, which nowadays hopefully is like kind of gone the way of the dodo.
yeah.
But yeah, you could get issued a pager as well when I started.
Yeah, that was our call out system. So as far as like the sleep, I think, you deal with stuff different when you're 27, 28 years old
Oh yeah.
as you do when I'm 52 now. So the sleep didn't really bother me all that much. It's just like one of those things where you just power through and you get through it. And that's how things were back then. You
Hmm.
couldn't show up to a SWAT call out and be like, "Hey, I'm super tired." You just
No.
deal with it and you move on. And I would say more than anything, especially in the younger years, it was just the grit and grind of not only working a 40-hour week, but then working all that extra time, on the call outs. Or a lot of times, for me, my SWAT training days were on my days off. So now instead of working 4 days, because we work 4 10s, I'm working 5 10s every other week. And so that grind I think is probably the most, and like I said, you just when you're new on the team and you just want to be on the team and you want to contribute, you just kind of weed through all the mental and physical, aspects. But I think the biggest thing too is people don't realize is what a toll it takes on your relationships at home.
Mm.
So to give you an example, the very first SWAT call out I ever got, my wife and I, because we had 2 kids, finally had a date night, and 5 minutes into the movie, my pager went off and we had to leave. So,
Yeah.
that's one of the tolls that it takes, also is just that missing some things here and there because you got to go. You got to take care of business. And if you don't show up to call outs because you have something going on at home, somebody's going to look at you and be like, "Hey, where were you? I had this going on." Well, that's not good enough. You need to come. Like people are relying on you.
Hmm.
So that would be, I would say, the physical aspect of it, but even more probably the mental aspect back then, was the one where you really had to like power through.
Yeah, yeah, and returning guest Mark Bouchard, he's been the emergency response team. He's a medic up in Canada. He's been on the show a couple times, but he detailed that the pressure and the expectation, but also that was self pressure, right? That was self expectation and loyalty to the team. Where he had planned a vacation and they got a call out, and he was ready to look at his girlfriend at the time and be like, "Hey, sorry, the team needs me. I'm gonna
Yeah,
go." I need to go with the fellas. I mean, there's so much, I think, and I hope everyone recognizes there's a positivity there. However, it can't be at the cost of like your health and your relationships. There has to be a balance. Do you
yeah.
have insights on, with all your time on and now being retired, like, is there a way that organizations and leaders can think about how we can maybe help that balance in a little bit of a way? I know that that's just kind of the job. Like sometimes you got to hang it up. Sometimes you're sitting down, with the family. Sometimes you're at your kid's event and you're like, this is that bigger deal. I got to go.
Yeah. I think the hard thing with that is from a supervisor standpoint is doing a good job now of recognizing burnout, recognizing in your troops, like when things are kind of getting stale with individual officers.
Mm.
That was non-existent in my early days for sure, because it's exactly like you said. Like if you miss a call out, you feel like you're letting people down, even though nobody will ever come to you and be like, hey, you're letting us down by not coming. That camaraderie and that bond that you have with that group that you spend so much time with, you feel like you're letting them down. And I would say now, and to give you the best example of that is, my last 5 years I was working and a sergeant on our team. I was working a ton of overtime and just call out after call out and doing my regular job in between that. And then you retire. And about 6 weeks after I retired, I didn't have that support of the team around you, and that, hey, if you're stressed or you're tired or whatever, it didn't really matter because you just powered through and you didn't know any different. And then once that support's gone, you're like looking around going, what am I supposed to do now? And so that was a struggle for me after I retired. But the leadership now, I think we've added 5 or 6 extra bodies onto our SWAT team to kind of alleviate some burnout. So
Mm-hmm.
right soon after I left, they did a great thing as far as going on actual standby. So we never had standby. It was always like, hey, you're on standby all the time. And if you can't come to a call out and you have 5 of them or 6 of them, we're probably going to be like, hey, what's going on? And boot you off the team. Now they've made great strides, and we have a team that's on standby. So the other folks that aren't on standby don't feel that pressure, like I gotta go, I can relax, I can spend time with my family, I can recover and do
Yeah.
all that. So the teams, that do that have that is definitely one of the positive things I've seen over the years of not burning their guys out.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that insight and that specific example, which is to add more people to the team, right? If you know that this is a thing, there's a growing awareness, but also there's credibility and value in allowing people the decompression because they don't feel guilty knowing that there's more people on the team to share the work, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
going to take my turn on the bench and I want you to take your turn on the bench, that kind of thing. That's like a concrete thing that we can do to support our people, right? So they don't burn out. Oftentimes in police and first responder wellness, we use this metaphor of the car, kind of redlining the engine, right? And at a certain point, you can't be revving at that pace. So it's like if we came up with a study, which I'm pretty sure there are, which is why a lot of people go to take-home cars. But if you're not driving the car hard all the time, it might cost you more at the beginning, but it's going to all the fleet is going to be better. It's going to be taken care of. It's going to save you money. You're going to be able to put more miles on it on the long term because it's not literally being driven and heavily accelerated up to 60, 80 miles per hour every single day and night consecutively. So it's like the same thing for our cops, where we can see and know that if we actually give people space and a little bit of time, like built in to not just say, well, it is what it is, well, then people are going to burn out and they're going to get hurt. They're going to get hurt mentally. They're going to have burnout. They're going to resign. All these things that we really don't want. And they didn't want when they initially signed on in the first place either.
Yeah. No, I agree. And to me, and working for Sworn and some of the stuff that I've been able to see through this program, awareness was the biggest thing that really hit home to me, because I had one stretch where I worked 16 days in a row, and we're not talking 2 hour days, like a solid 16 days in a row, averaging, close to 500 hours of overtime every year. But like you said, you just get to that norm, right? Where that's normal to me. I didn't see that it was out of the ordinary. That was my red line, as you could say, that I was used to performing and just being at that level nonstop. There was no awareness. Nobody ever pulled me aside and said, hey, maybe you should take a week off, or maybe you should go do this, or do you have any hobbies? Maybe you should go do that. My kids were all grown, so I didn't have the kids sports at the time. Wasn't running around coaching or doing other things because all of my kids were, like I said, grown. But I think the biggest thing, and like what you're talking about there, is just that awareness of, I need to kind of maybe pull back, and just having that supervisor or two that are like, hey, maybe you should pull back a little bit, maybe you should spend time doing this. The generation that's coming through now, from what I've seen, I feel like does that a lot better. There's a lot of the younger cops aren't interested in working 30 hours overtime a week. They want to work 40. They'll come work when a little bit when they're needed, but they're not jumping in front of the line to sign up for the overtime and working and working. So I think that they do a little bit better. It's that middle to older generation. I feel like that's how what you came up with. You
Yeah.
came up through the department working and working and working, and a lot of it has to do with when I first got hired, I was young. I had a wife, I had 2 kids, and to afford a house, you had to work some overtime. So it's just
Yeah.
a different generation. But like you said, I think the supervisors now, through awareness and through training that a lot of departments are providing, are doing a much better job of trying to read those symptoms of burnout.
Yeah. No, that's key. I think that yeah, we do talk about the generational differences, and I want to clarify my opinion, which is, a lot of people say like, well, they don't have the work ethic. And I hear this, from some of the older generations. They don't have the work ethic that we had. And I would say that it's just a different, like it's a label that we're putting on it, but I do think that the self-awareness, the attention to self-care is higher. That's what we're talking about. Also, like emotional intelligence is higher, so that they might recognize, because they learn these things that we didn't talk about when I was a kid, certainly. They might recognize when symptoms of their interpersonal relationship suffering are more pronounced and obvious to them than they were to me as a 20-something-year-old. And so with that, I think that it's recognizing that, sure, we can grind it out and call it work ethic, whatever, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's a good or bad. It just is. And how do we adapt with that and recognize the positives? And the positives are, me being even, I mean, I'm not far removed from that. I'm technically an older millennial, but I had periods where I was burning out, but I was just grinding through because of the culture and the expectation and my self expectation. So I'm not blaming anything. It's just where I was at. However, I became really bitter to be around. That was people at work, that was people outside of work. When I was working so much for something I really did care about, and I was very committed to the mission and very committed to making the difference at these different assignments when I was putting in extra, a lot of times it did actually breed resentment towards my job, towards the things I had to do. And that's not fair. Like no one like told me I had to do all that, but it was the thing that we can slide into if we're not aware, right? And that's
Yep.
kind of maybe if we had to make one word theme for the episode I keep hearing, and I'm recognizing we're going to return to, is that awareness piece.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. Some of the hardest workers that I was around was the newer guys because they want to prove worth. They want to
Mhm.
prove that they deserve to be there because they worked hard. I kind of think it's kind of the same as, there's in my generation of policing, there's a stigma for coming forward and asking for help.
Mhm.
There's if you come forward and ask for help, that means that you're either crazy or you're weak or something like that. And I think a great thing coming out of the new generation is they're not afraid they're more apt to ask for the help, which makes them better in the long run
Yep.
than somebody like me is going to be. And I agree with you 100%. It's not a lazy thing. It's a shift or a difference of opinion on kind of almost like what's important.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Priorities,
it's
right?
priorities 100%. And I think that, like you said, I don't think that that's a bad thing at all.
Yeah, with your time on, on the team or just in career, you talked about what was not around, or even cultural allowances that were not around when you started versus as your career progressed and coming out. And now, when you retired, you were the Sarge, who's like the ultimate, like looking after person of your team, and you're close to them, you're working alongside them, you see them, you feel their angst, you feel what they need. Any insights there from how your perception of police culture has evolved to be more attuned to those things?
Yeah, it's I would almost say it's when I went through the academy, it was almost a paramilitary type of atmosphere, and then when
Hmm.
you get on the SWAT team, it's that times 10, because the way that we always looked at it is if you're not disciplined and you're not performing every second of every hour, somebody can get hurt or killed. And I think that stringent discipline originally, when I got on the team for my first few years, is different than how it is now, because you still hold people to the same standards. You still hold people to accountability for how they react and how they do their job and safety and all those same standards. But when you're not in the moment, the outside of that's a little more relaxed. It's a little more, I don't want to say friendly. You're still a supervisor to an officer and there's still a job to be done. But I feel like I can have a conversation and get to know the people below me a lot more than when it was more of a military style SWAT team early on in my career.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's the biggest change that I saw is just really nowadays. I feel like supervisors really know the people, they know their families, they know, that Mikey has 3 kids at home, and I think that the personalization of it and not the harsh, I'm the boss, do what I tell you, you can't think for yourself, you can't make decisions, I'll make them all for you, is what I've really seen changed in that, which I feel like helps towards that, stability in those younger officers.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talked about some of the awareness pieces of the generation coming up. What things do you think you would recommend people think about, whether they are newer or whether they're mid-career or even like a few years from retirement? Like, what are the things that you noticed, not just in yourself, but in those you worked around and supervised, like the game changer things that people need to inject into their life or maybe lifestyle so that they can navigate the career a little bit better?
I would say it's just learning how to deal with the stressors instead of just, taking a deep breath and sucking it in and powering through. Some of the most important things is learning how, as you go through your career, to deal with the small things as they come up, as opposed to waiting till the end of your career or even after you retire and everything just kind of punches you in the head like with a sledgehammer. So that would be my advice, and that's what I feel like, even like a program like we have at Sworn,
Hmm.
is that's exactly what it is. It's, hey, let's make you aware of the small things, let's help you and give you resources to deal with the small things so that over the course of your entire career you're not getting hit in the head at the very end, or it doesn't even have to be the end when you retire. It could be another significant event, traumatic event, that now is just an accumulation of 10 of those, and it just hits you in the face. And I think that that's what I wish I would have had, is somebody to pull me aside and be like, hey, this, you got into 1, 2, 3, and 4, let's not wait till 5 to deal with it, let's kind
Mm.
of deal with some of this. And I'm a big fan, and I don't see anything wrong with, departments implementing like mandatory checkups, especially in certain areas. Our department had mandatory checkups, but it was only in like child sex crimes, internet crimes, like the really, really bad stuff.
Yeah.
But for the tactical guys and SWAT guys, we get called out a lot, and we see a lot of traumatic stuff. And whether you're involved in a shooting or you're on the backside and the team's involved in a shooting, it still affects you no matter what. And we're real good as a SWAT team about doing a one-time, debrief at the end, and then it just kind of goes away unless you were actually the one involved. A shooting like that could have more of an effect on somebody that's not involved in it than maybe it did if somebody that was involved in the shooting. Just giving that ongoing support and check-ins with professionals, I think, is where it's going to eventually go, and that's a huge benefit for the new guys.
Yeah, no, that's huge, and thank you for touching on Sworn, and we're gonna peel that back in a little bit as far as like what Sworn is. If people are avid listeners at the time this comes out, they'll recognize Sworn from conversation with retired Chief Jeff Spivey. But we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna get back into that in a sec. So there's a couple things I want to talk about. One is that the check-ins, right? And mandatory, man, it's like the M word that cops don't want to be told they have to do something. And I've
Yeah,
shared this before, and I see both sides, especially because there are people that are like, I don't want mandatory check-ins. I already have a therapist. So what
yeah,
is it? And I think that's, with the other perspective, specifically internet crimes, crimes against children, I think that's what most people can agree upon. That is the maybe the lowest hanging fruit where we should try to open up something like that or start a program that's mandatory. But I've also heard someone that supervises such a unit in the region that says, you know what, I think we're okay because I think everyone does that, right? I think everyone in that assignment like is pretty well aware and has their clinician, and like that would be great. However, we just said something which is I think, and
yeah,
thinking and perceiving maybe something's happening or being under the impression of, or I believe this, but I don't really know. I mean, that doesn't get us very far in police work in general, right? If you're
Yeah.
making an op plan, you're like, well, I think that there's indication of this. It's like, okay, cool story, like to be aware of, but that's where we're going to do scouting. We're going to look at the past history. We're going to see who else is associated to make sure we have a really dialed in plan. Same with investigations, right? Like we can't just like think that this might have happened. No, we need to find the evidence to prove it to the best of our abilities. So I just want that to be a little bit of a nudge of, rather than like, I don't know, I think that people know that it's an option and I think that we're getting better. Okay, like what can we do about it? And that is to say, for leaders and organizations, like let's step up our game and make these resources more readily available. And worst case scenario, I believe, in a mandatory check-in is the person doesn't really want to talk about their stuff. Okay, cool. Then the clinician should have a game plan, which is, okay, that's totally fine. Half your colleagues say that, half of them want to talk about something nitty gritty or at home. So this month or this quarter, we're going to be talking about sleep and sleep hygiene and self-care through that method. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, like if you go to any NTOA training, National Tactical Officers, they
Mm-hmm.
always say hope. You're right. I hope. I
Yeah,
hope. Hope is not a tactical solution, right?
exactly.
I
Mm-hmm.
hope. I hope this door breach is going to go good, or I hope this warrant's going to go. That's not a tactical solution. So
No.
in what you were saying, I agree 100%. Like, you can't hope that somebody's doing something. And, I kind of feel like the bottom line is this: is as an agency or as a supervisor, as a chief, your job is to give your employees the tools to succeed. Whether your employee chooses to use a certain tool or doesn't is a little bit out of your control. But if you provide it and they're aware of it and they know about it, then they have the option and hopefully the ability to use certain resources to help them in any part of their journey, whether it's relationships, financial, calls they're going on, stresses, any of that. So, one of the big things is providing those resources and allowing them to have access to it. And it could even be, a check-in could be a group check-in. It could just
Yeah.
be, hey, have the whole SWAT team take 2 hours out of your training day and have a counselor come in and just be like, hey, are you experiencing A, B, C, and D? If you are, then maybe you can get help. And some of the one of the things that actually happened on our team was a buddy system to where one of our operators was struggling and another operator saw it, not a supervisor, and just nonchalant, didn't go through the team, but kind of around through peer support of, hey, maybe somebody should check in on this person.
Mm-hmm.
And they did, and ended up, getting them the resources and helping that officer recover from a lot of the stressors that he'd been going through as far as home, team, work, everything. And just being reminded of that, hey, operators or sergeants or anyone on the team, it's not just the sergeant's job to recognize mood changes or habit changes. If you recognize something, then say something or help this person. And I think that that's a big one too. You're right. Anytime you go to a cop and say something's mandatory, they're just going to push. You could be like, hey, it's mandatory that I'm going to give you $1,000. And they're like, no, I don't want it, because
Yeah.
it's
There's a
mandatory, right? Or
there's a
even
catch.
though it's the biggest, yeah, even though it's the biggest benefit to them, if it's called mandatory, they're gonna be like, no way. But giving them the ability to find those resources easily is huge.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's the key, right? Increasing the ability, making it more accessible, like broadcasting, inviting, like all these types of themes, I think is really how we're getting to what we need to. Because we recognize, like you were touching on, retirement, and you kind of nodding to identity, and that is admittedly terrifying for a lot of people. I've had a lot of people, have retired in my circles in the last couple of years that they said, yeah, for a year or two, like they're kind of scared of it, right? They see
Yeah,
examples of retirement not going well. They have a purpose. They have all these things, and then so they realize, like, yeah, that's scary. Okay, what do I want to do about it now? Talk about it,
yeah,
plan on this and that. Um, and even more so when people leave the team. Like I know that there's a lot of people that they know the time's coming, but they're not looking forward to it because of the dedication and the camaraderie in these things. So I think we're doing a better job recognizing the giant life change in retirement. We obviously know the front end of becoming a cop. You change how you look at the world, you change your family dynamics, and how do you be aware, right? Awareness, so you can identify and figure out some strategies to do it in a healthy, healthful way. But then there's all these other transition points, and whether it's Luke Goodish, a counselor who's been on here before, but a lot of MHPs have shared like transition points are where we're really shaky. We're on shaky ground. And that's where we really need to take care of health in these different aspects and relationships to help us stay steady, because that is a critical point. And there's so many critical incidents in the career. There's significant incidents, things that happen at home that affect how we do the job, new baby, marriage, divorce.
Yeah.
Like these are really things that rock your world, sometimes in significant ways, good or bad. And so it is to recognize like a tool like Sworn can, like peer support, kind of keep an eye on things. And so I think this might be the best time to kind of talk a little bit more about Sworn and how you came to learn about it and start working with them.
Yeah, so I retired in July of 2024. So I've been retired just about a year, a little over a year. And like I said earlier, my last 5 years was probably I had probably the most significant incidents in my last 5 years than I did over my entire career. I mean, I had every cop has a lot of traumatic events and significant events, but just the last 5 years for me. In 2020, I was involved in a shooting. That same year, we had a hostage rescue, that I was the primary supervisor for, where a dad took his wife and 3 kids hostage in an apartment, and we had to do basically a crisis entry. So the year later, our team had another hostage rescue, and we had 2 within 3 years. And the previous, you know, 19 years I was on the team, had none of that. It was, barricades and warrants and stuff. So just the stressors of different calls, our team, and then we have a violent offender team. We call them CAST. They're the U.S. Marshals that go out, and they would always, if they needed help, they would call us and we would go out and help them locate the bad dudes. And, the team was involved in 5 shootings in my last 5 years, where we were involved in 1 shooting the previous 19. Me being in the position I was in, as far as like, when I go out and train, I always tell people, what are the 3 things departments get sued for? Civil rights violations, a failure to train, and a failure to supervise. Those are like the 3 big things. And
Mm-hmm.
in my position with our SWAT team, I'm 2 of those 3 prongs, right? So I didn't know it at the time, but when I retired, I'm like, well, that added a lot of stress onto me to make sure, am I training our guys the right way? Are we doing things the right way? How is our documentation, to make sure that all that is. So, you have all these stressors and you see all that, and it's awareness, and like I said, our deployments went through the roof. I was working 500 hours, and then I retire 6 months later, or about 6 weeks later after retirement. I'm like, what am I doing? What's going on? I didn't really have a desire to go back to work. But my buddy that I went through the police academy with, Sean Bear, is one of the owners of Sworn. And he called me up and was like, hey, are you ready to go back to work yet? And, I was looking for something, because like I said, like when I left, I was irritable. My wife's like, why are you so mad? I had a couple blow ups of stuff that 20 minutes later, I'm looking back going, well, why was I so upset about that? That doesn't make any sense of why I got so mad. And it just basically came down to all that stress dumped those last 6 weeks. And I didn't have the support of work to be around me to keep me going. So Sean called me up, told me what they were doing, met with him, and Sworn is purposeful work for me, from somebody that's gone through a lot of the things that they're trying to prevent.
Mm-hmm.
And so Sean called me up, and that's basically how I got hooked up with this. Sean and I went through the police academy together back in 1997.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. So tell us more about Sworn.
So Sworn basically is, if you look at Sean's background, Sean is a crime analysis, crime mapping background. He wrote a crime analysis program, and I kind of, for me, relate Sworn to that. It's basically using indicators to predict behaviors. So every department has a crime analysis unit, or some type of analysis unit that says, hey, for example, stolen cars. This type of car is getting stolen from this location on these days, these times. That's kind of how I view Sworn. Sworn's taking biometrics. It's taking calls for service that you actually go on, and it's taking your input that you put into the system, and it's analyzing everything to go, hey, maybe you're really stressed out right now. Here are some resources on how to de-stress. Or, hey, you're doing really good. Keep it up, but here's some things that maybe can even make you do better. It's preventative, in a way that I haven't seen anything as far as wellness goes. It's not taking physical wellness only, it's not taking mental wellness only, it's taking everything: sleep, physical, mental, and the stressors, whether it's personal stressors or work stressors. And it's taking all that information to give that user that overview of how am I doing? How am I doing all around, not in just one little area? And it's telling them, and it's the, like we talked about, is huge, is just that awareness.
Mm.
Awareness of, hey, you've had this traumatic event, you've gone to this call for service, you've worked this much overtime, you are having this relationship issue in your personal life. And it's trying to make you aware of the little things so that you don't get that dump like I had, right when you leave.
Yeah, it's like just inviting that pause. And there's different ways that people do it. Like some people are journalers and some people are meditators and some people use it as like it's like their weekly coffee date with their battle buddy, where you
Yep.
kind of get these opportunities to check in. But then beyond that, it sounds like there's other analytics provided, right? Other prompts where yeah, I might just talk about the same thing that I talk about with my buddy. That's really helpful for my personal, emotional, kind of maybe spiritual health. But at the same time, if I'm given these prompts of asking me to look at this, how's my sleep, how much overtime I've been working,
Yeah.
and what I surmise and what I'm learning is like you can have some tangible information, right? Some data to look at and be like, huh, okay, something here is not serving me well. What levers can I potentially pull to kind of get myself to a better outcome?
Yeah, and it's, for me, the example I use all the time is I live in Arizona. I went to my doctor for just a normal checkup, and he's like, "Hey, something was wrong with my potassium." And he's like, "You have creatine levels, and do you take a creatine supplement?" I was like, "No, I don't take anything." And he's like, "Are you drinking enough water?" And I was like, "Well, that's kind of odd, but yeah, I think so." And I got a 32-ounce cup, and I'm constantly drinking that all the time. He goes, "Well, have you measured it?" And I go, "No, I just know I'm getting enough water." And he's like, "Okay, well, in Arizona in the summer, you should be drinking 120 ounces of water a day.
Mm.
Go measure it." So I started measuring it. My refrigerator actually has an ounces thing on it.
Oh yeah,
I was only drinking like 70 ounces a day.
you're
But
hoping you were drinking enough.
exactly. In my mind, I was drinking more than enough. And then you actually measure it and you look at something that doesn't lie,
Yeah.
that's not gonna take you in the wrong direction. It's hard facts that you can't really dispute. And you realize, man, okay, maybe I'm not doing the things that I should be able to or should be doing to make myself healthier. And the water one is, for me, is just like the most simplistic example of that. Is you don't know unless you measure and you have
Mhm.
tangibles that you can really grasp.
Yeah, that's so good. I'm picturing this water situation where maybe you're at work or you're at home or whatever, and you're driving around, but you feel like you keep refilling this thing all the way up, and maybe you are, but you only drank a third of it and you refilled it, right? So you feel
Yes.
like
Yeah.
I've had like 8 of those things, but really it's like you've had like 2. I think that's an illustration that like we can apply that maybe symbol or like metaphor to all parts of our lives. Like,
Yeah.
do you take time to self-care? Sure. Okay, what are the things you do? Like I work out. Okay, how much do you work out? And is it stuff you enjoy? Are you distracted constantly? Is it like you start to do this thing and then you're on your phone for half the time? I don't have time for X. It's like, okay, let's look at your screen time. You're like, okay, let's not look at that. I believe you, right? So it's almost like giving you this like a little data point to call up or call like what you can do, right? Just bring it into the light so you know what you can work on.
Yeah, and one of the important things of this program too is setting goals.
Mhm.
So measurable goals, smart measurable goals that you can accomplish, that keeps you on track. That is your measure, right? That if you follow those goals, that's how you're measuring what you're doing and how you're going to achieve what you need to achieve. It's just like if you go to your doctor and your doctor's going to tell you, "Hey, if you don't stop eating fast food, you don't stop smoking 2 packs of cigarettes and drinking 10 beers a day, and you keep eating fatty foods, you're more likely to have a heart attack." So
Yeah.
this is our version of, hey, if you're not working out, you're not aware of your mental health or the calls or the stresses, and you're not doing A, B, and C, you're more likely to have maybe some type of stress disorder when you leave or during your career, as opposed to somebody that has all the awareness of these different areas to try to prevent that.
Yeah. No, fantastic. Is there anything else? I think people have gotten a taste and they can start to picture some of the things that SWAT incorporates. Is there anything else you want to share to kind of fill in the gaps for people?
The biggest thing for us, I believe, is with that program is not only, I know from my agency, we had a static app that was a program that gave, it was like you could go on it, but you had to go dig for it.
Mm-hmm.
To where Sworn is actually nudging you and telling you it's not something that you have to go seek.
Mm-hmm.
The app is basically taking all, or the program is taking all the information and it's seeking you out. It's not, you don't have to go seek it out. And all the information that's in there isn't stagnant. It's ever changing. It's completely individualized. It's not one program fits all. It's completely individualized to the person, confidential, so nobody else, agency doesn't have access to any of the information. But it's so individualized that you're getting information based on you, not based on generalities of our culture or our profession. And I think that that's really huge. But not only does this tell you, hey, these are indicators that you're seeing, but it's also giving you resources at your fingertips to help you deal with that. And whatever the resource may look like, it's different. Different people want different resources or they want different avenues. All of those are within that program. And that's what makes it, so amazing, I feel like, and a cutting edge by far.
Yeah. No, I like that. Just to recap, what I hear is this nudge, because we can have really good intent. Like, yeah, I want to get better at this, or yeah, I have this app, maybe there's this resource I'm aware of, but out of sight, out of mind, right? Whereas if it's nudging you, it's kind of prompting you, then it keeps you engaged and it keeps you tracked in. The second piece you mentioned was this specificity, right? Because cops are, we get judgmental, we get biased, we get set in our ways and routines, sometimes for good, sometimes not so good. But it is to say that if I'm just getting this information kind of blasted of like, hey, here's the nutrition tidbit, I'm like, yeah, I don't need that. My nutrition's pretty dialed in. Well, it may or may not be. And then the
Yeah.
sleep thing, it's like, no, I'm sleeping way better than I did 5 years ago, but I might be under rested. But unless we actually interact with a program like this, how do you know, right? And so
Yeah.
how do you have the data points? And then the last thing I liked is that referral to resources, right? So information is just one piece of it. Like, what do you do with it? How do you make it actionable intelligence? And so to plug it in, to be like, okay, so what now? What do I do about it? How do I actually work this into a goal, like you mentioned, so I can actually improve my situation, my health, my emotions, my stress, my performance? That's all I hear. So I think that that's fantastic.
Yeah. And I'm not a techie guy at all. Like they, cause Sean and then another Mark Dobbs is our analytics. They laugh at me all the time because they'll talk computer and I have no idea what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to like biometrics, I knew nothing about biometrics until I started working for this company. I got a Garmin watch, and now that I have it, I look at my Garmin and my Sworn app every day to see how my sleeping was, because I track all of my workouts and everything I do in the apps. And it's just like you said, it's awareness. Like, you don't know necessarily, because there has been nights where I'm like, I slept really good last night. Then I'll look at my biometrics and I slept okay, so just having that at your fingertips now for me has been a game changer. And it's, something I didn't even know existed before I started working for Sworn. So it's, you look at different things. And like I said, if it wasn't easy, I wouldn't use it. And if it's techie, I don't usually use it. But this is something techie that just involves you. It's your information, and to give you an example of that, like one of the questions on the daily survey that we have, and the daily survey is basically your input into the program. One of them is, how did you sleep last night? And you either mark 1 through 5. I slept great or I didn't. Well, there's been times I've gone in there and I've marked a 4, like I slept really good last night. Then I look at my biometrics and it's like, no, you didn't. So then it kind of gets that curiosity. Okay, well, why is there a difference? What did I do that was different from 2 nights ago when I slept good? And it gives you that awareness of, okay, I was way hotter last night, or my house was warmer, or I watched TV for 3 hours before I went to bed that time, where the other time I didn't, or preparation or something, So it's just that awareness, like we've been talking about, of having that on there and being aware now. And knowing that you're sleeping good or you're not.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. I think most of us recognize that in this job, we are curious. Like we're trained to be curious. Like suspicious is the twist, and sometimes negative vein. But yeah, like curious and like be truth seekers, right? Be problem solvers, and like, okay, why is this? And get to the root of it. How do I improve my situation? You can
Yeah.
gamify it in some ways, and then really the reward will be felt. It'll be seen and felt
Yes.
through yourself and those around you. Andrew, I appreciate your time and bringing us your insights from the job experience, but also your work now with Sworn. Can you tell the listeners where they can learn more? I believe it's sworn.ai is the website, but then also any other information that people should think about.
Yeah, the sworn.ai is the website. You can go on there. It pretty much explains everything of what the program does, benefits. And then there's also one where you can schedule a demo if you want to see a demo of the actual program. And like I said, from 27 years and not having something like this, it's a game changer for sure, and something that will definitely benefit the users.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.